Lee Kang lived as a child in a quiet seaside town where his family owned a small restaurant. At the time, his main dream was to become a chef like his mother. He was passionate about cooking, often helping in the kitchen and dreaming of the day when he could cook for people himself. Food was always a way for him to express love and care. These moments in the kitchen were a source of joy for little Lee Kang. For one hot summer day, a little girl, Moon Cha-yeong, walks into the restaurant. She wandered in by accident, hungry and tired. Lee Kang noticed her and, seeing her condition, offered her something to eat. He prepared a simple dish of rice and vegetables for her, but at that moment, it became something special for Cha-yeong. Her eyes lit up when she tasted the dish, and even though she was just a child, the flavor was deeply embedded in her soul. A warm, homemade meal prepared with love became more than just a meal for her. It was a moment she remembered for the rest of her life, and it was then that her dream of becoming a chef began. As the years passed and Lee Kang grew older, he realized that his childhood dream of becoming a chef could not become a reality. His family had different expectations for him. They wanted him to become a doctor. Under pressure from his family and social norms, Lee Kang decides to give up his culinary ambitions and enrolls in medical school. Thus begins his journey to becoming a successful neurosurgeon. However, despite his success in his career, something inside him remains unsatisfied. Although the hospital work is satisfying, it does not give him the joy he felt in the kitchen when he was a child. Now Lee Kang is a successful but cold neurosurgeon, completely immersed in his work. He has become what his family expected him to be, but he has lost contact with himself. He finds it difficult to express his emotions and keeps everyone at a distance. Food is no longer a part of his life, though inside he still feels a longing for the joy that cooking once brought him. At the same time, Moon Cha-yeong, inspired by that childhood memory of a dish cooked by Lee Kang, decides to become a chef. She goes a long way to fulfill her dream and becomes a successful culinary artist. Working in various restaurants, she gains fame and respect in the professional environment. But the most important thing for her is being able to cook food that brings joy and comfort to people. Her cooking philosophy is deeply connected to what she experienced as a child, when an ordinary dish changed her perception of the world. Many years later, fate brings them together again. Lee Kang and Moon Cha-yeong meet at the hospice where they now work. He as a doctor, she as a chef cooking for patients. Their first meeting is unexpected, and they don't immediately recognize each other. For Lee Kang, it's just a new job. But for Moon Cha-yeong, it's meeting the man who influenced her life so many years ago. Though they don't immediately remember their childhood encounter, something elusive develops between them, a bond that soon begins to grow. Lee Kang remains as cold and withdrawn as ever. He's used to keeping everyone at a distance, believing it's the best way to protect himself from pain. Cha-yeong, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of him. She brings warmth and joy to a world that seems so bleak and harsh to him. Her food doesn't just satiate her patients, it comforts them and helps them forget their pain, if only for a little while. Through her dishes, Cha-yeong expresses all that she cannot put into words. Despite the aloofness that Lee Kang carefully maintains, he begins to feel something inside him change. Working at a hospice, where he encounters terminally ill patients, forces him to rethink his life. Meeting Moon Cha-yeong and her approach to cooking awakens memories of his own childhood dream of how food was once a source of joy for him. Moon Cha-yeong, though she doesn't immediately realize who is in front of her, senses something special in Lee Kang. She sees his hidden pain and realizes that behind his cold exterior is a man who also needs healing. But for the moment, she decides not to try to get close to him, letting events unfold naturally. Lee Kang continues his work at the hospice, immersed in patient care. His life remains strictly structured, and he still maintains an emotional distance from everyone, including Moon Cha-yeong. Despite their sudden meeting, he tries to ignore her, ignoring the surfacing memories of childhood and dreams he buried long ago. However, working in a hospice, where every day reminds him of the fragility of life, gradually forces him to reflect on his choices and missed opportunities. Cha-yeong, for her part, is left deeply moved by the fact that she has met Lee Kang again. She realizes that their meeting is no coincidence, and although they haven't discussed their past yet, she feels that their fates are once again intertwined for a reason. Cha-yeong immerses herself in her work, continuing to prepare food for the patients with special care and attention. Her approach to food reminds her of how a meal prepared by Lee Kang once changed her life, and now she wants to share that joy with those in need of comfort. This time, the hospice has a new patient, an elderly man who, after learning that he can no longer live long, loses all hope and refuses to eat. His condition is deteriorating, and the staff is worried that he may die of starvation before his illness. Cha-yeong decides to take responsibility for his nutrition and begins to prepare meals for him that remind him of his youth. She hopes that through food she can restore his desire to live, even if only for the few days he has left. Her endeavor helps the man remember the best moments of his life when he felt joy and love. Lee Kang watches Cha-yeong cook for the patient and sees that her meals really do work wonders. The man gradually begins to accept the food, remembering his past and finding the strength to live a few more days with a sense of fulfillment. This touches Lee Kang deeply. Although he does not express his emotions out loud, he finds it hard to accept that the food he once loved can have such power, and he begins to wonder if his own life is devoid of that meaning and joy. In parallel, a line involving Lee Kang's cousin Lee Jun is revealed. Their relationship has always been complicated, and the rivalry between them only intensifies. Lee Jun, who also works in medicine, is jealous of Lee Kang's success and thinks that Lee Kang has gotten too many privileges because of his family connections. This creates tension in their communication, and their personal conflicts begin to affect their professional lives. For Lee Kang, this is another source of stress that he carefully hides behind his mask of professionalism. Meanwhile, Cha-yeong continues to cook for patients, finding comfort in the fact that her food can bring joy even in the most difficult moments. Her personal philosophy that food can heal the soul becomes an important part of her work at the hospice. But despite all her successes, she can't help but think of Lee Kang. Her memories of her childhood and the connection she feels with him are growing stronger and stronger. She begins to wonder why their paths crossed again and how it relates to their personal histories. Lee Kang, slowly opening up under the influence of her kindness and caring, increasingly feels his former dreams starting to resurface again. His coldness begins to melt away, and although he still tries to keep his distance from her, something inside him is changing. Every time he sees Cha-yeong working in the kitchen, it makes him both admire and ache to realize that he himself once gave up his dream to become what he is now. Cha-yeong continues to work at the hospice, preparing meals for the patients. Her cooking skills and the warmth she puts into her dishes bring comfort to people during difficult times in their lives. Every day she tries to come up with new dishes to help patients remember the best moments of their lives and feel loved. She realizes more and more that her work is not just satisfying patients' hunger, but bringing them real emotional relief. Lee Kang, watching her work, continues to struggle internally with himself. He finds it increasingly difficult to ignore his past dream of becoming a chef, especially when he sees how food can have such a powerful effect on people. He realizes that he once gave up something important for a career as a neurosurgeon, and now that feeling is starting to return with renewed vigor. Despite his coldness, he can't help but admire the way Cha-yeong cares for the patients and helps them through his meals. During this period, the hospice receives a new patient, a little girl with a terminal illness. She takes her condition hard and refuses to eat. Cha-yeong decides to help her through cooking and starts to prepare dishes that remind her of her childhood and evoke warm memories for her. Gradually, the girl begins to accept the food, and although her condition hasn't improved, she begins to feel calmer and happier thanks to Cha-yeong's care. For Lee Kang, this becomes an important moment. He sees how food can overcome barriers that even medicine can't always overcome. This incident touches him deeply, making him reflect on his life choices and what he missed out on by giving up on his dreams. Meanwhile, tension continues to build between Lee Kang and his cousin Lee Jun. Lee Jun is jealous of Lee Kang's success in his profession and believes that Lee Kang has always been the family favorite. Their conflicts become more and more apparent, especially at times when they clash at work. This strained relationship only intensifies Lee Kang's inner conflict, who feels he must constantly prove his worth. Cha-yeong continues to see Lee Kang's hidden pain. Her intuition tells her that he's not as cold as he seems at first glance. She decides to approach him with caution, trying not to get too obviously close, but still can't ignore her inner desire to understand him better. Inwardly, she feels that there is a connection between them that goes back to their childhood, even if they haven't remembered those moments yet. Lee Kang, though keeping his distance, begins to notice how Cha-yeong affects his emotional state. Her presence makes him wonder how long he can continue to live a life of strict discipline, ignoring his true desires. However, the fear of opening himself up to someone and admitting his vulnerabilities still keeps him from taking serious steps. As time passes, Lee Kang and Cha-yeong begin to communicate more and more. They both slowly open up to each other, though their conversations remain low-key. Cha-yeong shares her thoughts on life and how food can heal not only the body but also the soul. These words of hers touch Lee Kang deeply, who begins to realize that perhaps he has always tried to stifle his soul by giving up cooking and immersing himself in medicine. Events at the hospice begin to bring them even closer together. The shared care for the patients and their painful stories create an atmosphere in which it is impossible to remain emotionally detached. Lee Kang feels his cold mask beginning to crack under Cha-yeong's influence, though he is still afraid to admit it to himself. The relationship between Lee Kang and Moon Cha-yeong continues to grow despite their internal barriers. Both characters feel that there is a special bond between them that stretches back to their childhood, even if they haven't yet realized that this bond was formed by the very dish Kang cooked years ago. This time around, they begin to connect more at work, though their conversations are still low-key and imbued with caution. There is a new patient at the hospice, a woman whose illness is progressing very quickly. She refuses to take food and her condition is rapidly deteriorating. Cha-yeong decides to take responsibility for her nutrition and begins preparing special meals to try to inspire the patient to continue living. However, her efforts don't yield instant results, and this depresses her greatly. Despite all her care, Cha-yeong is faced with the fact that even her cooking skills cannot completely change the patient's fate. This becomes an important moment of realization for her. Not everyone can be saved, and sometimes accepting the inevitable becomes necessary. Kang watches her struggle and realizes that Cha-yeong is experiencing the same emotions that he himself goes through every day as a doctor. She too has to face the fact that you can't always help people, even if you put your heart into it. This realization brings them even closer together. Kang begins to respect her more for her resilience and her ability to take care of people despite the hardships. At the same time, the story of Jun, Kang's cousin, unfolds. The rivalry between the two reaches a new level when Jun publicly criticizes Kang's working methods, claiming that his approach to patients is too cold and aloof. This conflict not only intensifies their personal differences, but also puts Kang in the position of choosing whether to continue working in his usual manner or to try to change and be more open to his feelings and emotions. Cha-yeong witnesses these conflicts and sees how this pressure affects Kang. She tries to support him, though not directly, but through her patient care. Every day in the kitchen, she continues to cook with the same inspiration and love as before. But deep down, she feels that her efforts are not always getting the desired results. Kang is becoming more and more reflective about his life. He begins to realize that his coldness and distance is just a defense against the pain he has felt throughout his life. Working at the hospice and interacting with Cha-yeong awakens long-forgotten emotions in him. Gradually, he begins to open up to her, though he does so slowly and cautiously. At some point, they find time for a conversation that takes their communication to a new level. Cha-yeong shares her thoughts on how food can heal the soul, and Kang tells her about his inner contradictions and how he gave up his dream of becoming a chef to pursue a career as a doctor. This conversation becomes a turning point for them. Both characters begin to realize that their lives are full of parallels, that they both struggle with inner conflicts, and that this is what makes them so close. Although they aren't ready to admit their feelings to each other yet, they realize that their bond is growing stronger. After the patient Cha-yeong has been helping finally starts taking her meals, the atmosphere at the hospice changes noticeably. The patients begin to see her not only as a caring chef, but also as someone who is able to give them hope even in their most difficult moments. Cha-yeong becomes a source of comfort for many, and her food, filled with warmth and caring, continues to inspire people to renew their strength to fight disease. Kang is becoming increasingly thoughtful about her impact on patients. He observes how her kindness and sincerity change people around him, and begins to realize that he has always lacked such closeness in his professional life. As a neurosurgeon, he's used to hiding behind a cold mask, but now, thanks to Cha-yeong's presence, he's beginning to re-evaluate his priorities and his life as a whole. Another line that comes to the surface at this point is Kang's relationship with his mother and family legacy. His family, including his cousin Jun, has always seen him as the continuer of the family tradition, and that pressure has been on him all his life. Jun, who continues to be jealous of Kang's success, becomes more involved in family affairs and tries to undermine the family's trust in Kang in order to take a major role in the family hospital himself. Cha-yeong senses that something is going on in Kang's life, but he is still not ready to fully open up. Their interactions are becoming more frequent, however, and they talk more every day, discussing patients' life in their own stories. Cha-yeong shares with him how food has helped her cope with difficulties in her life, and talks about the complicated relationship with her mother that still bothers her. Kang, for his part, gradually reveals his inner feelings. He shares with Cha-yeong memories of his childhood, when he wanted to become a chef but was forced to give up his dream by family pressure. This conversation brings them closer together, as Cha-yeong realizes that Kang has spent his entire life suppressing his true desires in order to conform to the expectations of others. Meanwhile, at the hospice, the tragic story of one of the patients unfolds. A man who has been fighting a long battle with the disease realizes that his days are numbered and decides that he doesn't want to die alone. He asks Cha-yeong to prepare a final dish for him that reminds him of the happiest days of his life. Cha-yeong accepts his request with trepidation and prepares a special dish for him, filling it with his care and love. This moment becomes an important reminder to everyone at the hospice of how important moments of joy and warmth are, Even when life is nearing its end, Lee Kang, by being present, realizes that food, like medicine, can heal not only the body but also the soul. He begins to see the world from a different angle, and his cold attitude toward life begins to melt under the influence of Cha-yeong and her approach to life and death. Their relationship continues to grow. They now spend more time together helping patients and sharing their thoughts. Their interactions feel increasingly warm, and although they are not yet ready to admit their feelings, they both begin to realize that something more than just friendship or professional connection is budding between them. After the dinner that Lee Kang proposed to Cha-yeong, their relationship begins to take a more personal turn. This is the first time they decide to spend time outside of the hospice, which takes their communication to a new level. Lee Kang, though still reserved, shows increasing signs that he wants to be closer to Cha-yeong. This is a big step for him, as he's always avoided deep personal relationships before for fear of opening up and showing his vulnerability. At dinner, they discuss a lot of things they couldn't say to each other before. Cha-yeong talks about her complicated family history, the strained relationship with her mother that still weighs on her, and how cooking has become a way for her to cope with the pain. Lee Kang, for his part, shares his experiences about how hard it was for him to give up his dream of becoming a chef and how a medical career became a forced choice for him. They find much in common in these stories, realizing that each of them has faced the suppression of their wants and needs in their lives for the sake of those around them. Their conversation becomes even more meaningful when Lee Kang begins to talk about his long-standing disappointment in himself. He confesses that despite his successful career as a neurosurgeon, he feels an inner emptiness. For him, medicine has become routine, and his real dreams and desires have been left far behind. This candid moment brings them even closer together. Cha-yeong realizes that behind Lee Kang's outward coldness lies a man who, like her, needs healing. As their relationship develops, family tensions around Lee Kang also increase. Lee Jong continues to try to undermine his cousin's position, using every chance he gets to belittle him in front of the family. He wants to prove that his own medical achievements are more significant and continues to push his own agenda. This puts Lee Kang in an even more difficult position, as he has to fight for his place in the family amidst his internal conflicts. Cha-yeong, seeing how this relationship affects Lee Kang, tries to support him. She uses her cooking skills as a way to express care and attention, preparing meals for him that help him feel better at times when the family pressure becomes unbearable. Lee Kang is beginning to realize that food is not just a nutritional necessity, but something much deeper related to emotional support and healing. Things continue to unfold at the hospice as well. New patients bring new stories, each of which becomes an important part of both Lee Kang and Cha-yeong's lives. Both characters see each patient face the inevitability of death, but also try to find moments of joy and peace in their remaining time. This again reminds Lee Kang that his life, while structured, is devoid of the very moments of happiness he could share with others. One of the patients, who has long been aloof and refuses to socialize with others, begins to show interest in what Cha-yeong is cooking. She decides to prepare a special dish for him to help him remember something bright from his past. This scene becomes a symbol of how food and caring can reach into the deepest corners of the human soul, helping even those who are already desperate. Lee Kang sees this process and, although he is used to working with people on a purely physical level, begins to realize that emotional healing is often more important than medical healing. Cha-yeong continues her mission despite her inner torment. She grows increasingly attached to Lee Kang, but her own fears and insecurities still prevent her from taking the decisive step towards her feelings. Nevertheless, their communication becomes more and more sincere, and both begin to realize that they can't ignore what's going on between them. After dinner and candid conversations, Lee Kang and Moon Cha-yeong continue to grow closer. Both begin to realize that their lives have changed since they met, and that they can no longer ignore their feelings. Lee Kang, who has been withdrawn and secretive for a long time, begins to open up to Cha-yeong more and more, even though it's not easy for him. He finally begins to recognize that her presence is helping him to reconsider his life goals and desires. At this time, the tension between Lee Kang and his family, especially his cousin Lee Jong, continues to grow. Lee Jong, feeling that he is losing control of the family business and his position in the medical world, tries to undermine Lee Kang's reputation. He does his best to discredit him in front of his father and colleagues, claiming that Lee Kang is losing focus at work because of his personal worries. This pressure becomes another challenge for Lee Kang, who now has to balance his growing affection for Cha-yeong with his responsibilities to his family. Moon Cha-yeong, for all her desire to support Lee Kang, also faces internal conflicts. She feels that she may be a source of trouble for him, especially seeing how his family reacts negatively to their coming together. She begins to worry that their relationship may only make Lee Kang's life more difficult. These thoughts become a source of doubt for her, and she tries to keep her distance even though her heart is drawn to him more and more. Meanwhile, the hospice has a new patient, a woman who lost her entire family in a car accident. She refuses to accept help and does not want to socialize with the staff or the other patients. Cha-yeong is deeply moved by this case because she sees her reflection in this patient, a woman who has suffered severe emotional trauma. She decides to do whatever she can to help her, believing that she can reach her heart through food. Cha-yeong starts cooking special meals for her, hoping that it will help her find the strength to move on with her life. Kang watches Cha-yeong's efforts and sees how she puts her heart into helping patients. He realizes that her way of caring for people through food is more than just a job. It's her mission. He begins to see her as someone who can help him find himself, and this process becomes an important moment of redefining life for him. The patient gradually opens up, accepting Cha-yeong's care. The meals she prepares help the woman to revisit memories of her family, and this becomes a way for her to begin the process of emotional healing. This case reminds Kang once again that people need not only medical help but also emotional support, which he himself had long ignored. Kang begins to realize more and more that his life needs to change. His usual mask of coldness and professionalism, which he has been hiding behind for years, is slowly crumbling under Moon Cha-yeong's influence. Her presence is a revelation to him, and he realizes that he can no longer ignore his feelings and past dreams. For the first time in a long time, he begins to seriously consider that he can afford to be happy, and that this happiness has to do with Cha-yeong. Meanwhile, Cha-yeong, still unsure of her feelings, continues to struggle with inner doubts. She worries that she might cause more problems in Kang's life, especially since their rapprochement has already become a topic of discussion in his family. She tries to keep her distance even though she's internally drawn to him more and more. But the thought that she could ruin his career or affect his relationship with his family keeps her on her toes. Her new hospice patient becomes an important part of their interaction. A man who has been alone all his life takes his illness hard, realizing he has no one to share his final days with. This affects Cha-yeong greatly, and she decides to help him by cooking dishes that can remind him of the best moments of his life. She tries to give him at least some warmth and comfort by using her cooking skills. Kang sees Cha-yeong once again helping a patient deal with pain through food. His admiration for her grows, but he also begins to realize that he can't stay away anymore. A conflict arises in his soul between duty and real feelings. As he watches her work, he decides he no longer wants to suppress his emotions and ignore his dream of cooking, which has been a closed page for him for so long. During one of the hospice dinners when Cha-yeong is cooking for the patients and staff, Kang unexpectedly offers to help her in the kitchen. This comes as a complete surprise to her, as he has always stayed away from cooking up until this point. They prepare a simple dish for the patients together, and this moment becomes important to both of them. For Cha-yeong, it's a symbol that Kang is beginning to accept his love of food, and for him, it's the first step toward acknowledging his feelings and allowing himself to be vulnerable. Amidst their rapprochement, the conflicts in Kang's family continue. Jun continues to create tension by trying to undermine the family's trust in his cousin. He takes every opportunity to make him look bad, and this pressure takes a heavy toll on Kang. But now he doesn't want to be a victim of the circumstances and starts to stand up for himself. He is helped by the support of Cha-yeong, who, although not directly, shows him that life can be different, filled with joy and warmth. Kang realizes that his life is changing, and that these changes are unstoppable. He decides to no longer hide his feelings and speak openly about what is important to him. So this decision begins to affect his attitude towards his work, his patients, and his colleagues. He awakens a desire for more than just following his family's expectations. Cha-yeong, seeing these changes, also begins to rethink her fears. She no longer feels like the source of problems in his life, but instead realizes that their relationship can be a source of inspiration and strength for him. Gradually, her insecurities begin to give way to new feelings that grow stronger and stronger. The relationship between Kang and Moon Cha-yeong continues to grow, but remains complicated due to the emotional barriers and family obligations that both face. Kang is increasingly aware that his feelings for Cha-yeong are becoming an important part of his life, but he is still holding back for fear of disappointing his family and letting down the expectations placed on him as a neurosurgeon. His inner conflict grows daily, especially as he sees Cha-yeong finding his true passion in cooking and caring for patients. Meanwhile, a new patient enters the hospice, a young woman named Jin, who has recently learned that her illness is incurable. She is experiencing deep depression and is unwilling to accept the reality of her condition. Cha-yeong, seeing her suffering, decides to prepare a dish for her that could restore her will to fight. She finds the recipe for Jin's favorite dish, a warm broth with noodles that her grandmother used to make when Jin was a child. When Jin tastes this dish, her eyes fill with tears, The taste of her childhood helps her remember the moments when she felt loved and protected. This dish gives her comfort and brings her back to the best moments of her life. Cha-yeong continues to support her, helping her accept her condition and find meaning in continuing to live. Kang, watching this, is once again convinced that cooking is not just food, but also a way to heal the wounds of the soul. At the same time, Kang faces new pressures from his family. His grandfather begins to show his displeasure that Kang is spending too much time working at the hospice, instead of focusing on running the family hospital. Kang realizes that he has a difficult choice to make between his family and his own desires. He begins to question whether he can simultaneously follow his calling as a doctor and be true to himself. Lee Jun, his cousin, continues to advance at the hospital and take every opportunity to take Kang's place in the family structure. He notices that Kang is becoming more and more removed from his responsibilities at the hospital and tries to use this to his advantage by increasing his influence over the family. This creates a new tension between the brothers, and Kang is forced to make difficult decisions. Meanwhile, Cha-yeong feels that their relationship with Kang is becoming increasingly complicated. She realizes that he is struggling with his feelings and his obligations to his family, and tries to support him, even though she herself is having a hard time dealing with her own emotions. She begins to wonder if they can be together, given all the obstacles standing in their way. Kang, realizing that his life is slowly losing meaning without Cha-yeong, decides to spend more time with her to figure out the best course of action. They spend more time together discussing their lives, pasts, and dreams, but there is still a lot of unspoken between them. Cha-yeong is open to her feelings, but Kang is still hesitant, not knowing how to overcome his inner barriers. After the events at the hospice where Moon Cha-yeong cooked a meal for Hai-jin and helped her find emotional peace, the characters' lives continue to evolve under difficult circumstances. Lee Kang is increasingly immersed in his thoughts and doubts, tormented by internal contradictions. His work as a neurosurgeon brings success, but leaves him emotionally drained. He begins to realize more and more that cooking and the connection to people it creates gives him a far greater sense of meaning in life than any medical career. There are moments of sincerity and intimacy between Kang and Cha-yeong as they discuss their childhood dreams and desires. Kang tells her about how he once dreamed of becoming a chef, but had to give it up for the sake of his family. Cha-yeong, in turn, shares her memories of how food became a way for her to express her love for people. They find common ground, and something more than just friendship begins to form between them. Meanwhile, Lee Jun is increasing his influence at the hospital. His plans become more ambitious, and he sees Kang becoming emotionally distant from his family and work. This gives Jun even more opportunities to advance and take more important positions in the family structure. He uses his cunning and manipulation to undermine Kang's authority and pits him against his relatives. At this time, an elderly couple who have lived a long life together enters hospice care. They are both on the verge of completing their journey, but it is important for them to spend their last time by each other's side. Cha-yeong, observing their relationship, realizes how important it is for these people not only to have medical attention, but also to be able to keep their feelings warm through something as simple as food. But she decides to prepare a dish for them that reminds them of their youth when they first met. This dish is fried fish with spicy seasonings that they had on a date years ago. As the couple tastes this dish, they smile at each other as they reminisce about their love and the moments they had together. Cha-yeong watches them and feels how food can be a bond between people, helping them preserve important moments even at the threshold of death. This experience reaffirms for her the importance of her hospice work and gives her the strength to continue doing what she loves. Kang, seeing how Cha-yeong cares for the patients through her meals, becomes more and more attached to her. He feels his life is becoming empty without this emotional connection he sees in her. But his fears and family obligations continue to keep him from taking decisive action. He doesn't know how to get out of this vicious cycle, and it's creating more and more tension for him. Meanwhile, Cha-yeong begins to notice that Kang is suffering more and more under the weight of his responsibilities. She wants to help him, but fears that her interference will only make his life more difficult. She sees him gradually drifting away from his family, but is not ready to open up to her completely. Their relationship continues to grow amidst this internal tension. But one day, Kang decides to talk to Cha-yeong more openly. They meet at a cafe, where Kang confesses that his life has become difficult and confusing. He talks about his pressure from his family and how the dreams he left behind still haunt him. Cha-yeong listens to him carefully and suggests that he think about what he really cares about. This conversation makes Kang reassess his priorities once more, and he begins to realize that he can no longer ignore his feelings for her. However, when Kang returns to the hospital, he is once again pressured by his family. Lee Jun continues to manipulate the situation, and Kang finds himself in danger of losing his position at the family hospital. So this creates even more stress for him, and he is forced to make difficult decisions about his future. He realizes that his path to happiness will involve many sacrifices. Cha-yeong, for her part, continues to work at the hospice. where she finds more and more meaning and fulfillment. She feels that her work helps people on an emotional level, and it gives her strength. But her thoughts keep returning to Kang. She wants to help him, but realizes that only he can decide what is important to him. Kang is faced with a stark choice: continue to follow his family's expectations, or finally allow himself to seek the happiness he's dreamed of all his life. At the hospital, tensions are running high. Jun continues to advance, taking on more and more powerful positions in the family system, and the pressure from the family intensifies. Kang begins to realize that his dreams of cooking and truly connecting with people through food seem increasingly elusive, despite his success in his medical career. Moon Cha-yeong, who sees his inner suffering, tries to support Kang, but feels that his family obligations are still holding him back from embracing his true feelings. She continues to work at the hospice, helping patients through cooking and creating moments of happiness for them during the most difficult times of their lives. At this time, a new patient enters the hospice, a middle-aged woman who is suffering from a serious illness. She has long ago lost interest in life and sees no point in fighting on. Cha-yeong begins to communicate with her, trying to find out what could restore her will to live. After a few conversations, the woman talks about how, when she was young, she loved a special dish her mother used to make for her, dumplings with a spicy filling. Cha-yeong decides to prepare this dish for her, hoping it will help her remember the best moments of her life and give her back her strength to fight. So when the patient tastes the dumplings Cha-yeong has prepared, her face changes. She begins to talk about her childhood, her mother, and the time they spent together. This moment becomes a breaking point for her, and she decides that she still wants to fight for life despite her illness. This incident once again shows Cha-yeong how powerful a tool food can be in emotionally healing people. Meanwhile, Kang realizes more and more that his life without Cha-yeong is becoming empty and meaningless. He sees how her work at the hospice gives her not only professional satisfaction, but also a deep sense of meaning. He begins to think that he himself could return to his childhood dream and start his life anew, following his true desires. However, this decision comes with great risks. If he goes against his family's wishes, he could lose his career and position in society. At this time, Jun decides to strike the final blow. He arranges a meeting with Kang's grandfather, where he tries to convince him that Kang is no longer focused on the hospital and family interests. Jun uses every possible argument to undermine Kang's credibility, claiming that Kang is preoccupied with his personal problems and has lost interest in medicine. This puts even more pressure on Kang, who realizes that he will soon have to make a difficult choice. Meanwhile, the relationship between Kang and Cha-yeong continues to deepen. Both of them realize that there is a strong emotional connection between them, but are still afraid to admit it to each other. Cha-yeong begins to realize that her feelings for Kang are stronger than she thought, but she's not sure if he's ready for such a move given his obligations to his family. Finally, Kang decides to make a bold decision. He meets Cha-yeong and openly tells her how he feels. He confesses that she has become a source of inspiration and meaning to him, and that he can no longer ignore his dream of cooking. Cha-yeong, touched by his frankness, confesses that she feels a strong affection for him too. After their emotional confession, Kang and Moon Cha-yeong begin a new phase in their relationship. Although their feelings are now exposed, they both realize that there are serious challenges ahead. Kang is still under pressure from his family, who do not accept his desire to walk away from his medical career and follow his dreams. Cha-yeong, on the other hand, continues to work at the hospice, where every day brings new challenges, both emotional and physical. They decide to try to find a balance between their feelings and life circumstances. Kang begins to think more and more about leaving the hospital and returning to cooking. However, this choice seems almost impossible for him, because of the immense pressure from his grandfather and family, who insists that Kang must continue his career as a neurosurgeon and take over the family hospital. He knows that any decision he makes will affect his entire life and could have serious consequences for his relationship with his family. Meanwhile, Cha-yeong continues her dedicated service to the patients at the hospice. A new patient comes into her life, an elderly man who was once a successful chef. He is losing interest in life and sees no point in continuing to struggle. Cha-yeong decides to cook for him one of his own dishes that was once famous in his restaurant. When the man tastes the dish, he can't hold back tears as he recalls his best moments in the kitchen. This moment inspires him to keep fighting despite his illness. This incident touches Cha-yeong on a deeper level, making her think even more about the connection between food and emotional healing. She sees how food gives people back the will to live and realizes that her work at the hospice gives her the opportunity to help people on an emotional level despite their physical suffering. Kang, watching Cha-yeong help a patient through cooking, feels that he can no longer ignore his passion. However, he also realizes that in order to be with Cha-yeong and live the life he dreams of, he has to make a difficult decision and openly confront his family. As the pressure mounts on Kang, he decides to talk to his grandfather and finally admit that he no longer wants to be a part of the family business and wants to devote himself to cooking. This conversation proves to be extremely difficult. His grandfather, who has spent his life building the family hospital, cannot accept Kang's decision and sees it as a betrayal. In response, Kang faces the threat of disinheritance and all his privileges in the family. After a frank conversation with his grandfather, Lee Kang is faced with an important life choice. Despite the threat of disinheritance and family support, he decides to follow his heart and his dream. Kang realizes that he can no longer live by other people's rules and is willing to make sacrifices to be happy and build a life based on his true desires. However, this decision does not come easily. Kang's family is not supportive of his choice. His grandfather and other relatives believe that he is betraying the family tradition and their years of work to establish the hospital. They put a lot of pressure on him to change his mind. Lee Jun, who has always been jealous of Kang's position in the family, sees this as a chance to strengthen his position and continues to manipulate the situation to get rid of his brother as a competitor. While Kang faces resistance from the family, Moon Cha-yeong remains supportive of him. She sees how difficult this choice is for him and tries to be there for him despite her own worries. Their relationship grows deeper, and they begin to discuss their future together. Cha-yeong feels that their connection is more than just a romantic relationship. It's a partnership that helps both of them find themselves and follow their dreams. Meanwhile, a new patient is admitted to the hospice. Jung-woo, a young man who was a successful entrepreneur but suddenly falls ill and finds himself on the brink of life and death. He is filled with bitterness and frustration because his plans for the future have been ruined. Cha-yeong, seeing his pain, decides to help him through food. She prepares dishes for him that remind him of his childhood and a time when he was happy and carefree. This helps Jung-woo soften and open his heart to talk. Kang, seeing how Cha-yeong cares for the patients, increasingly admires her ability to heal people through cooking. He realizes that food is not just a way to satiate the body, but also a way to heal the soul. This experience convinces him that cooking is his true calling and that he wants to build his life by helping people in the same way Cha-yeong does. Against this backdrop, Kang and Cha-yeong begin to discuss opening their own restaurant. For Kang, it's not just a business idea, but an opportunity to finally return to his childhood dream. He wants to create a place where food will be a source of comfort and joy for people, just as it happened to him as a child when he first cooked a meal for Cha-yeong, not knowing that it would change her life forever. After Lee Kang and Moon Cha-yeong decide they want to open their own restaurant, their plans together begin to take on a clearer shape. Kang becomes increasingly fascinated with the idea of creating a place where food will be a source of not only physical comfort, but also emotional healing, similar to what he saw in the hospice through Cha-yeong's work. For both characters, the restaurant becomes a symbol of a new life where they can realize their dreams and desires. However, their plans face serious obstacles. Kang continues to receive pressure from his family, especially from his grandfather, who still cannot accept his decision to give up his medical career. Tensions increase at the hospital, especially after Lee Jun begins to move up the career ladder more aggressively. He seeks to take Kang's place at the family hospital and does everything he can to prove that Kang doesn't deserve his position. Despite all the difficulties, Kang and Cha-yeong continue to move forward with plans to open a restaurant. They begin looking for a suitable location for their establishment and planning the menu. Cha-yeong sees this not only as an opportunity to express her love of cooking, but also to create a space where people can find solace and joy through food, just as she herself did as a child. Meanwhile, the hospice receives a new patient, an elderly man who suffers from a serious illness and feels cut off from his family. Cha-yeong decides to help him by preparing a special dish that has been important to his family for many years. When the man tastes the food, he can't hold back tears as he recalls the moments when he cooked this dish for his children. This memory helps him to bond with his family, and he begins to share his feelings and experiences with them. So this situation reassures Cha-yeong that food is more than just a means of satisfying hunger. She sees how through food emotional connections can be restored, bringing joy back into people's lives and helping them overcome their most difficult moments. This incident also inspires her to continue developing her and Kang's idea of a restaurant where every detail will aim to bring warmth and comfort to people. Kang, seeing how Cha-yeong helps patients through food, begins to respect her even more. He realizes that their bond is not only based on love, but also on a shared mission to help people through cooking. So strengthens his resolve to finally step away from his family and pursue something that brings him joy and meaning. After Lee Kang makes a firm decision to follow his dream and open a restaurant with Moon Cha-yeong, their lives begin to change. Both realize that their path will not be easy, but they are willing to overcome all challenges together. Kang, having finally spoken openly to his family about his plans, faces a cold reception from his grandfather, who disapproves of his choice. This creates a new tension with his family, but Kang no longer wants to live within the confines of other people's expectations. Cha-yeong supports Kang in all his endeavors. Together, they start working hard to realize their restaurant idea. They find a suitable space, start discussing design and a menu that should reflect their shared values. For Cha-yeong, this is not just a job, but an opportunity to put her soul into what she does. She sees it as a chance to create something special, where every diner can find solace through food. However, amidst these positive changes, challenges continue to arise. Lee Jun, who previously tried to take Kang's place at the family hospital, sees his departure as an opportunity to solidify his position. He tries to turn his grandfather and other family members against Kang, showing that he is abandoning them for his personal ambitions. This creates even more pressure on Kang, who begins to feel that his family is rejecting him not only as a professional, but also as a person. Their restaurant becomes a symbol of a new life for them, where they can give people joy through food. They become more and more convinced that their decision was the right one, despite all the obstacles. However, family differences continue to escalate. Kang tries to find a way to mend his relationship with his family, but realizes that his choice to live by his own rules will have long-term consequences. He realizes that he can no longer be a part of the life that others have chosen for him. And it's a hard but necessary decision. The last episode becomes a pivotal moment for Lee Kang and Moon Cha-yeong. Their restaurant is getting ready to open, and they are both anxious before the big event, realizing that this is not just a new stage in their careers, but also a symbol of their personal freedom and inner growth. They have put all their energy and emotion into creating this place where people can not only enjoy the food, but also find solace and healing, as the food in their lives has become inextricably linked to emotional and spiritual experiences. As Kang and Cha-yeong continue to prepare for the opening, Kang faces one last challenge from his family. His grandfather decides to give him one last talk in which he bluntly states that he is disappointed in his choice. His grandfather believes that Kang has betrayed the family by choosing the path of cooking and withdraws his support and inheritance. Kang, despite all the emotional turmoil, stands his ground. He realizes that he can no longer live by other people's rules and must choose his own future. It's not an easy step for Kang, but he realizes that opening a restaurant is his true path, which brings him joy and satisfaction. Cha-yeong supports him, assuring him that together they can overcome any difficulties. Their relationship grows even stronger amid the challenge, and they're both ready to move forward, despite the loss of the Kang family's support. The opening of the restaurant goes well. The first customers are the people Kang and Cha-yeong have supported and inspired throughout their time at the hospice. Each dish becomes part of the story of people who have found solace through food made with love. Kang and Cha-yeong see their restaurant becoming a place where people can feel care and attention, which further strengthens their confidence in the choice they made. Meanwhile, Lee Jun continues his career at the hospital, gaining what he dreamed of: family recognition and influence in the medical field. At some point, however, he realizes that despite his career success, his life is not bringing him joy. He begins to wonder if his path was the right one, and remembers how Kang always followed his dreams, even if it meant losing everything. These reflections leave Jun deeply confused. In the final moments of the episode, Kang and Cha-yeong cook together in the kitchen of their restaurant, enjoying simple moments of happiness. So they realize that despite all the obstacles, they have managed to build their lives the way they wanted them to, and can now be happy doing things that bring them joy and meaning. The story ends on an optimistic note, showing that love, understanding, and following one's dreams can overcome any difficulties. Kang and Cha-yeong find their place in the world by creating something special that helps not only them, but also the people around them.